The Cobblebank Machete murders, innocents lost in Melbourne's darkest night. On the night of August 24th, in the quiet suburb of Cobblebank, Victoria, two young boys were walking home after a basketball game. Their laughter still echoed from the match they had played, the adrenaline of victory and youthful energy pushing them along. But in mere minutes, their lives would be cut short in one of the most brutal and senseless murders Melbourne had ever witnessed. This is not just a story about crime. It is about the collapse of safety in a community that once felt untouchable. It is about two innocent lives, extinguished with unimaginable violence. And it is about the question that still haunts Cobblebank. Who were the masked killers who carried machetes into a suburban street? And why did they decide that children would be their victims? The night was ordinary in every sense. Families were finishing dinner, televisions flickered with nightly news, and kids were indoors scrolling through phones or playing games. For two boys, aged 12 and 15, it was simply the end of another basketball night. They had been playing since afternoon, sweating through jerseys, shouting encouragements, and sharing jokes. Neighbors later recalled seeing them laughing as they walked, one bouncing a basketball against the footpath. They weren't in a rush. The boys were relaxed, enjoying the night air. But the streets of Cobblebank were no longer as safe as they seemed. Unbeknownst to the boys, they were being watched. A group of masked individuals, believed to be between 16 and 24 years old, were lying in wait. Their weapons of choice weren't handguns or knives. They carried machetes, large, intimidating blades capable of inflicting catastrophic injuries. The attackers struck quickly. Witnesses described the sound of running footsteps, then screams, piercing, desperate cries. One boy attempted to flee, but the assailants were faster. Another tried to shield himself, but the machetes tore through any defense. It was over in moments. By the time neighbors ran outside, it was already too late. The boys lay bleeding, their bodies covered in wounds so severe that some responders later whispered of possible dismemberment. First responders described the scene as something out of a nightmare. Blood pooled across the pavement, belongings scattered, a basketball rolling slowly across the road. Neighbors stood frozen in shock, unable to comprehend what they were seeing. The paramedics rushed to stabilize the victims, but their injuries were overwhelming. Slashes to vital areas, massive blood loss, trauma that few could survive. Despite desperate attempts at resuscitation, both boys succumbed to their injuries. For the paramedics, many of whom had seen countless tragedies, this was different. Children are supposed to be safe. Children are not supposed to die like this. The crime scene was quickly cordoned off. Police tape stretched across the street. Flashing lights illuminated the night sky, and detectives began the painstaking process of collecting evidence. Blood patterns, discarded items, faint shoe prints, all were logged. But even in those early moments, detectives knew they were facing a case unlike any other. Behind the headlines were two young lives that had only just begun. The 12-year-old, remembered by classmates as full of energy, had a contagious smile. Teachers described him as someone who could brighten a room, a boy who loved basketball but also dreamed of being an engineer someday. He was the kind of child who cared deeply about others, quick to defend a friend, quick to share a laugh. The 15-year-old, taller, more reserved, had a quiet determination about him. He loved the game just as much, but his dreams were bigger. He talked about studying sports science, about maybe one day becoming a coach to help other kids succeed. Friends said he was fiercely protective, especially of those younger than him. Their families were shattered. At the hospital, a mother collapsed when told her son had not survived. A father clung to the edge of a hospital bed, begging his boy to wake up, knowing he never would. At their funerals, the pain was unbearable. Classmates lined the streets, holding flowers and handwritten notes. Basketball jerseys were draped over the coffins. Teachers wept openly. The loss was not just personal, it was communal. The killers remained faceless. Police described them only as masked males, estimated to be between 16 and 24. But who were they? And why did they attack children? Theories abound. Some investigators believe it was a gang initiation ritual, a brutal act designed to prove loyalty and fearlessness. Others think the boys were mistaken for rivals, innocent victims in a case of mistaken identity. Still others fear it was random, a demonstration of power by a group intoxicated by violence. What is certain is the brutality of their actions. The choice of weapon was no accident. Machetes are designed to intimidate, to dismember, to kill. These weren't quick stabs in a heated fight. These were deliberate, powerful strikes aimed to destroy. To understand this crime, one must understand Melbourne's history with machetes. In the mid-2010s, youth gangs like the Apex Gang began making headlines. Known for carjackings and home invasions, these gangs wielded machetes not just as weapons, but as symbols of dominance. Unlike guns, machetes were easy to acquire, cheap, and legal to purchase in certain contexts. Over time, machetes became synonymous with fear. Homeowners reported waking to masked intruders wielding them. Victims of carjackings described the cold glint of a blade pressed against their throats. Police cracked down, but the culture persisted. For young men drawn to gangs, the machete was a badge of honor. The Cobblebank murders represented the darkest evolution of this culture. Children, not rivals, targeted in a suburban street. Police faced enormous challenges. The attackers wore masks. The area had limited CCTV coverage. Witnesses were either too frightened to speak or claimed they saw little. Detectives appealed to the public, offering rewards for information. They combed through hours of surveillance footage from nearby streets, businesses, and public transport hubs. They interviewed known gang members, scoured social media for chatter, and monitored encrypted messaging apps. But fear kept the community silent. In neighborhoods where gangs hold power, talking to police can be a death sentence. And so, despite weeks of work, no arrests were made. The murders sent shockwaves across Melbourne. Parents stopped letting children walk alone at night. Basketball courts, once filled with laughter, sat empty. The sense of safety in Cobblebank was shattered. Vigils were held. Hundreds gathered with candles, their faces illuminated in the dark. Flowers and toys piled high at makeshift memorials. Speeches were given, prayers whispered, tears shed. But beneath the grief lay rage. How could children be butchered in their own neighborhood? How could killers walk free while families buried their sons? Politicians seized on the tragedy. Some demanded tougher laws on youth crime. Others called for harsher penalties for carrying bladed weapons. Activists pushed for investment in community programs, arguing that prevention was the only true solution. The debate grew fierce. Was this tragedy the result of failed policing, a broken justice system, or a society that had allowed disenfranchised youth to find power only in violence? Meanwhile, the families demanded one thing: justice.
There's no answer from police. There's no answer from justice. We keep following the cases. Nothing. What I told police last night, I need an answer from my son. My son is just gone like this. He's a basketball player. He's not a criminal. It's shocked my community. We don't know what to do with our kids. We came here as a part of your community. We're not different.
The Cobblebank murders were shocking, but not unique. Across the world, machete attacks have become symbols of urban violence. In London, machete crime surged in the 2010s, linked to youth gangs and drug disputes. In parts of Africa and Latin America, machetes are tools of both work and war, the duality making them easy to weaponize. The common thread: disenfranchised youth seeking identity and control, turning to blades to assert dominance. Melbourne had joined a tragic global pattern. As months passed with no arrests, fear deepened. Were the killers still in Cobblebank? Were they planning another attack? Were they bragging about what they had done, hidden behind usernames on social media? For the families, the lack of answers was unbearable. They had lost their children, but justice remained out of reach. Each day without progress was another wound. If the killers are caught, the courtroom will become the stage. Prosecutors will present the brutality of the crime, the lives stolen, the terror inflicted. Defense lawyers may argue youth, immaturity, or mistaken identity. Psychologists may testify about gang culture and desensitization to violence. But no verdict can undo what was done. Justice, in this case, will always be incomplete. Cobblebank is no longer the same suburb. Parents keep children inside after dark. Basketball courts remain quieter. Strangers are eyed with suspicion. The laughter that once filled its streets has been replaced by silence. The memory of two boys, dreamers, athletes, sons, lives on in memorials, in classrooms, in whispered stories. But their deaths remain an open wound. And until the killers are found, Cobblebank will live under a shadow. The brutal Machete murders of Cobblebank stand as one of the darkest chapters in Melbourne's history of youth violence. Two boys, full of promise, were ambushed and slaughtered on their way home from a basketball game. Their killers remain hidden, masked not only by physical disguises but by a culture of silence and fear. It is a story of innocence destroyed, of families shattered, of a community gripped by fear. But it is also a story of resilience, the demand for justice, the refusal to forget, the fight to reclaim safety. The question remains, who killed the boys of Cobblebank, and will justice ever catch up to them? Thank you for watching. For more deep dives into cases where crime, justice, and systemic failure collide, subscribe to the channel True Crime Spectrum.